Type 1.5 diabetes, autoimmune, generally affects people over the age of 30, adult onset, slow progressing, often gets misdiagnosed as type 2 diabetes.
Oh.
Often gets misdiagnosed as type 2 diabetes. Often people with type 1.5 diabetes are treated as though they are type 2, and they're given oral medications, and oral medications do not work.
So what happens if you're 1.5 getting metformin when you should be getting insulin?
Yeah. Your glucose stays high. You get frustrated. Your doctor says, oh, well, metformin didn't work. Why don't we try glipizide? Why don't we try another sulfonylurea? Why don't we try Invokana? Why don't we try an SGLT2 inhibitor? Why don't we try a DPP4 inhibitor? And they just they throw drug after drug after drug after drug after drug. And before you know it, a lot of people with type 1.5 end up with 3, 4, 5 different medications.
Yeah.
And all of these medications are supposed to either stimulate their pancreas to make more insulin or help them decrease the absorption of carbohydrates in their intestinal tract, or improve their insulin sensitivity inside their liver and muscle. And they do minor things here and there, here and there, here and there. But the real problem is that they just don't make enough insulin because they have an autoimmune condition.
Got it. Okay.
But they were never tested for the autoimmune condition, so they don't know. So the doctor doesn't know. So they come to us and they go, oh, hey, here are my symptoms. And then we go, we know the symptomology.
Yeah, we know.
Right? People describe what's happening and go, okay, great. You probably have type 1.5. They go, they get tested, and they find out, oh, yeah, I have an autoimmune antibody. One of, they could have one, they could have multiple antibodies.
So what test do you take to determine? Like, so if you go to your doctor, what do you say? I need what kind of test to determine if I have 1.5?
Okay, so the most important thing you can take is what's called a diabetes antibody panel.
Okay.
They test for 5 different antibodies. These antibodies just get complex, but just for the purposes of being simple. Number 1, GAD, GADD. Number 2, ICA. Number 3, IA2A. Number 4, insulin antibody, or that was known as IAA. And number 5, ZNT8. Okay, so these are all just like complex, weird words, and they're all 5 different antibodies that you could test positive for.
You have to go to an endocrinologist, or you can go to your family physician, or
you can go to your family physician and just say, hey, I would like a diabetes antibody panel, and they should be able to get those tests for you. If you test positive for at least one of them, then you have an autoimmune version of diabetes. Period. End of story. That's a definitive autoimmune test.
Wow.
In addition to that, we also recommend getting a C-peptide test. A C-peptide is basically a test that will indicate, it gives you a good indicator of how much insulin your pancreas is capable of secreting. Your C-peptide will either come back as low, medium, or high. So if you test positive and you have one antibody at the minimum, maybe multiple, and your C-peptide value is low, what that means is that you are not manufacturing very much insulin because you have an autoimmune reaction.
Wow.
If your C-peptide is medium, that means you have an autoimmune reaction and you are likely on your way to becoming low.
Which would indicate why after 30, you would get the 1.5.
Exactly right. Exactly right. So if you kind of like put these 2 tests together and kind of play detective, you can determine what the right course of action is. But like we talked about earlier, treating the person with type 1.5 with oral insulin sensitizing medication is not going to work. It just doesn't work. And so what ends up happening is they get frustrated. They go, oh, something's wrong with me. Something's wrong with my body. And they get anxious and depressed and frustrated. In reality, just like other conditions where the condition is presented, the medication doesn't solve the problem. People get frustrated, they internalize, and they go, oh, I'm the problem, I'm the problem. Maybe it's in my head, maybe I'm not, maybe something's wrong with me. In reality, the answer is no, your pancreas does not make a sufficient amount of insulin. That is the problem. We need to solve that problem. The way you solve that problem is by injecting insulin. You use small amounts of insulin in type 1.5. And generally speaking, the last thing I'll say about it, generally speaking, people with type 1.5 diabetes end up using very small amounts of insulin.